All right, so I want to welcome everybody, and like I said, I hope we will have a few more people to be able to come in. And I want to thank everybody who is here, and I want to particularly thank our Family Promise National folks. And I'll introduce a couple of them, and then we have a couple more, I think, who are in as well. And I'll let the team introduce them. So I'm Margaret Robin, and we do our coordinated community response every fourth Friday. And we started during COVID, did them weekly when everything changed drastically. Now we're doing them once a month. So, and I am acting director at Family Promise. I also work with Appalachian Promise. That kind of comes from both directions for doing these monthly meetings. So I'm particularly thrilled that this time we are able to have we're affiliate of the National Family Promise. We talk all the time about the fabulous resources that are provided by the National and are really grateful to be a part of that effort. I will say the model has changed a lot. Different places are doing different things. We started with the original model where people rotated through churches after several years, and we started ours late for the Tri-Cities, 10 years behind Kingsport and Johnson City. And at ours never worked as well and smoothly as positively as it should have. So we pivoted in I think 2019, and about that time there was a group of agencies, folks who were recognizing the need for day services for people experiencing homelessness. We stepped up as that nonprofit, so which we started with a eviction prevention grant the following year, the first time for us to get large dollars. That was COVID dollars. And Sam Ferguson, who is with us, we hired him as our case manager at that time, and he's done a fabulous job. A year later, we started our day services at Salvation Army. So we still do the areas of housing prevention, which is usually eviction prevention, rapid rehousing, and then we do the shelter with the day services 3 days a week, and we partner. Hunt Memorial United Methodist does 2 days a week. So, and with that, I wanted to also say that today's is very family oriented. We serve more families now than we did with our previous model. And I'll say across the country, people have gone to static sites for their families. I don't know how many people are doing exactly what we're doing, but we've been greatly supported by Family Promise in the model that we have come to. But we just wanted to say we have more individuals than we have families, but we also look at a lot of those individuals who are experiencing homelessness. Some of them have children that they can't have because they are experiencing homelessness. Some people have been estranged from their families because of mental health or addiction issues. So hoping that by our help, they can be reconciled and be a more traditional family. Anyway, but also in their presentation, the Family Promise, many of them, all of them do drug testing and just weird low barrier, and we do not do drug testing. Also want to be sure that people know that the Salvation Army, where we are located by agreement, they also do not do drug testing, but there is zero tolerance. You can't be here and sitting there and shooting up, or certainly if you have pills to take, et cetera, that are part of your medication, that's absolutely allowed, but no active illegal drug abuse, and also no selling of drugs, of course, on the premises. But definitely we support MAT, the medically assisted treatment, and we have one of those treatment businesses come on site that works with clients once a week. So, and Sam, you can jump in if I if I need to be corrected, so on anything. So with that, we wanted to do a little bit on housing first, just to refresh us. And I know I spoke of to Carolyn and Shari about the HUD. We showed that. It was not quite a year ago. A great discussion. Some of y'all might have been there. It was an online webinar that we showed 30 minutes of about Housing First, which was a great discussion. Had somebody on it from a Family Promise. That video is no longer available on the HUD website. That whole section of innovative discussions is not there, which is very disappointing, but I was thrilled to remember we had at least 30 minutes of it. But we wanted to kind of refresh and talk a little bit about what Housing First is, why it's so important, et cetera, just to remind us, update us, give us some information that we can share when there are discussions with other people who may not be as supportive as we are. So that's where this came from. And so we want to welcome Carolyn Gordon, who is the Chief Program Officer at Family Promise. And if I'm not right, it's because I checked him on the internet. So, and Shari Jones, who's Director of Programs. So I'm going to turn it over to y'all. And if you want to introduce, I know Kara and Brad are on here. So if you want to also introduce them, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really great to be with you all this morning, approaching afternoon. And so, yes, Brad Mole is a recent team member on the national team as well, Director of Housing. So the Housing First certainly overlaps with shelter models, prevention services, but definitely in that housing space. And then Kara Balderi is our Director of Advocacy. She is based in DC. And Margaret, as you already mentioned, HUD, the Housing First has sometimes gotten politicized, or that term's been co-opted maybe into other things, but there certainly is policy around Housing First as well. So they are excited to be here too, to also learn from you all, but certainly just be another voice from Family Promise to this conversation. Since we do have kind of an intimate gathering, I'd love to put folks on the spot. Just so this really isn't us talking at you. We are very passionate about what we do at Family Promise. We're passionate about the topic of Housing First. So we will come at you strong with content and information, but I would love for it to be as much of a dialogue as possible. So thanks, John, for coming on camera. So I would love just to hear who all is on the call. And then if you want to share a little bit of what you see as Housing First, or questions you have about Housing First, that would really help to inform this conversation. And John, since you did come on camera, could I put you on the spot first to introduce yourself to us? And you are on mute.
There we go. My phone's getting a little bit of problem. Yeah, so I'm a community outreach person with Creekside Behavioral Health. We're a psych hospital in Kingsport, 96 beds. We get a lot of homeless people from Sullivan County and the surrounding area, and we're always looking for housing and appropriate housing, whether it's detox or what have you. But that's kind of where we're at. We do get a lot of homeless people that come through Creekside.
Thanks, John. Renee, can I put you on the spot to introduce yourself and share anything you want about Housing First, questions, comments, concerns?
Yeah, I am Renee Crick. I am the Children and Youth Coordinator for Bristol Behavioral Health Services, which is a division of Frontier Health. And I guess I don't have any questions just at this point, but I do want to say that I actually have personally volunteered with Family Promise through my church, and I think it's an amazing program. I just want to say thank you for what you guys do.
It's like I planted Renee on this call to say that, but I really appreciate that. Margaret gave a really great overview of Family Promise, but what's so cool is, we have close to 200 sites, 40 plus states. So we have thousands of congregations involved, and we have thousands of volunteers. So it's always awesome to be in rooms, virtual or in person, and, learn from someone who's like, hey, my mom actually serves a dinner when her church hosts it on Tuesday night. So, yeah, I'm glad you've had a good experience, Renee. You make it possible and help us to prevent and end homelessness for families. Sam, I know you kind of had a little bit of an intro and people do know you, but I would love if you would like to come off mute and share your role and kind of experience with Housing First too, maybe.
I'm Sam Ferguson. I'm the case manager here for Bristol's Family Promise and also the director of the day center upstairs. The best way I know to relate Housing First, we recently helped house a couple, two young people that were in their 30s. They fought all the time when they were here. They were battling addiction. They both fought all the time. A lot of other organizations had trespassed them, told them they couldn't use their organization anymore.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to house them, a lot of people told me, you're just wasting your time. The two of them will
Mm-hmm.
fight and be kicked out of housing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've had them in housing for about 4 months now. They're actually going to marriage counseling together.
Mm-hmm.
They've both got jobs. They're doing excellent. But actually, they came back up here yesterday and they were outside and they were seeing people that they used to see from the streets, and it kind of triggered them, and they had a little spat outside. So their improvement comes from being in a housing stable environment, and I feel like what happened yesterday just goes show more that how the streets kind of trigger them, how it's very hard to make a change in your life when you're out there on the street. So
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. There's a lot in that story that you just shared. So thank you for setting the stage a little bit of why we're talking about this. I know there's a couple of other folks on the call. If you are there and would like to come off of mute, I'd love to hear more about who you are and your role. Shari.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
Oh Lord, it did come on. So my name's Shari Kaiser. I'm a community health worker with Ballot. So we serve the 8 counties in Northeast Tennessee and then some in Southwest Virginia. I'm primarily Sullivan County, Hawkins County. Family Promises helped out with some of my patients that I had in Bristol previously and were amazing with some rent and apply and helping with housing. So what we need is just community collaboration that we try to reach out, and anybody's welcome to call me if you have any questions. Again, we appreciate everything that you guys do.
Nice. Thanks, Shari.
I think
And we're-
Marissa Muse is driving, so
Okay.
she may not be able to come on.
Sounds good.
There she comes. She's
Oh.
coming.
Say, you're not going to see my whole face, but hi, I'm Marissa Muse. I work with Village Behavioral Health. I do business development for them. We are a residential treatment facility for mental health and substance use disorder for adolescents, boys and girls ages 9 to 17. What I think about when I think about homelessness is, and I'm not sure, I mean, mostly I guess this would be the South, because the South is the Bible Belt. And if we could get more churches on board, I mean, you can stand anywhere in East Tennessee and throw a rock and hit a church. So if we could get, more people on board, we can essentially end the homeless epidemic that we have. So, and I know that's really kind of regional and regionally specific to the Bible Belt. And then maybe it wouldn't be that way, maybe out in the Midwest or whatever. But we could definitely make a huge difference here, because I know homelessness, it's only getting worse. They got, it expanded after COVID. And it seems like every waiting list that I know of is at least a year, for mothers with children. So it's really something that we need to try to eradicate as best as possible.
Yeah. Thanks, Marissa, and drive safely. I always appreciate when folks are multitasking and you can take a Zoom from anywhere these days. Planting a little nugget too about that congregational partnership piece. So one of the things that we're exploring, and Brad at the helm being the director of housing, is where we have congregational partnerships that can help with housing, not even just the shelter piece that is still part of the Family Promise model, but many congregations might have underutilized buildings that could be converted into affordable housing, or they have land and we can build on that. So we have a couple of pilots going nationwide, but we're always interested and willing to explore that further with folks. So if you think you might know a congregational partner in your area who's like, oh, they would love to get into housing, I know they have the resources, let's talk. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Shari. We will do a little bit of a presentation. I think what's great is then this is recorded, can be shared with whomever. Anything in the PowerPoint can be passed on as well. And it's just at least going to be a little bit of a catch-all of Housing First, right? So a little bit of the data, a little bit of the pull on your heartstrings, a little bit of the why we do it. The thing too is Housing First is one of those terms that kind of gets thrown around. And I think it might mean things to different people. It's related to low barriers. Sometimes you hear harm reduction, trauma-informed care, right? We got a lot of buzzwords in our sector. But the goal at the end of the day is to be serving those who need help with the right resources at the right time. Certainly for Family Promise, that's families. And last year we saw a 40% increase in families experiencing homelessness. So sometimes many of the individuals that are showing up, as was said earlier, there is a family with them. They might be separated from them and in different locations, but there's a lot of families experiencing the housing crisis and also individuals. So the model of Housing First, trauma-informed care, all that good stuff works with anyone because, again, it's just serving folks with the right resource at the right time. So with that, the trickiest part of the meeting is if Carolyn can get her slides up. So bear with me.
While you're doing that,
Yeah.
at Family Promise, we doubled the number of individuals we saw between 23 and 24. This year, it doesn't look like it's going to double from last year. It's up, but probably not doubling. We'll see. We'll see. The year is just barely begun. I mean, we're almost halfway through, but we're also seeing a lot of changes that will affect. So, okay.
Well, just while she gets the presentation up, I just wanted to give a little bit background on myself. I am with the national office now, but I started actually 10 years ago at an affiliate in Gainesville. I was the program director. It was just me and the executive director for a very long time. And I worked my way up from boots on the ground to executive director, and I left, and now I'm here at the national office helping to share information about our programs and how we effectively serve families in our community, especially looking at the most vulnerable and how we can have no wrong door for people to access help.
So can you all see my slides?
Yes.
Are you seeing a big slide?
Yes.
Okay.
You did it.
Yay. Thank you. Then we'll try and dismount at the end of this conversation. But until then, we're good to go. So Shari, take it away.
Okay, so when we think of Housing First, a lot of them think is housing only, but it's not. Housing First, I want people to look at it as a full toolbox. It's housing first stabilization and community transformation because everyone deserves a full set of tools in order to build their life. So speaking of the tools, everyone is kind of born with their own little toolbox. Some have many tools, others are just given only a hammer. And of course, a hammer is very versatile. You can use it for a lot of things, but it uses a lot of force. So it can help families somewhat or individuals somewhat build the foundation for their lives, but they need other tools. So this helps us understand people and families who are experiencing homelessness. So what it looks like, what life looks like for somebody that only has a hammer, is very rough. People seem aggressive or non-compliant at times because they're frustrated that they're trying to use this hammer to fit into or use the hammer as a tool for a situation where it doesn't apply. It's survival. Basically, the hammer is survival mode and fixing life with only one tool. And traditional housing models expect everybody to come into either shelter, housing, or any other help fulfilled with a full set of tools. And that's what causes a lot of the disconnect between the service providers and those that they're serving. They're coming in not with a full tool set, they're coming in with just a hammer. So Housing First is a tool to build a better foundation and to build that better toolbox. So Housing First provides immediate housing for those that are in need. There's no requirements for sobriety or employment, like most of you guys know. It meets people where they are at, not where you expect them to be. And Housing First can be applied to not only shelter, but any other type of housing services. Housing First is not it is not a free ride. It's not without accountability, and it's not unsafe for children. And of course, it's not always easy. Like I said, we're talking about our families having a toolbox. Well, a lot of the service providers don't have the tools they need to effectively address some of the needs that our families who are coming in with just the hammer are facing. So completing priorities, landlord pressures, of course, because a lot of the landlords, you might have a lot of community pushback. Like Sam's example was like, they were like, why are you housing this person? They're not ready for housing, but housing is not readiness. Housing is a right. And lack of housing can cause other traumas. As he was saying before, like when they were housed, they weren't fighting, they weren't having these squabbles. But when we brought them back into that traumatic experience of homelessness, it triggered them and all of that aggression came back out because, again, we went back to the hammer. But Housing First is structured, it is supportive, and it is transformative. So what it looks like for Family Promise. We have low barriers to entry, shelter, no ID, income checks, drug tests. We have wraparound supports, safe planning, case management, centered on housing, and then ongoing post-housing support. So that is the main key to Housing First is being successful, is having those support services when they move into housing. Make sure that stabilizations go with them into housing. That's what makes Housing First successful. Housing First doesn't mean no requirements. Our model removes unnecessary barriers, but we still uphold clear, appropriate expectations to ensure safety and integrity. Of course, we want to make sure that you are the child's parent when you're coming in the shelter, so we will ask for proof of caregiver-child relationship. We do background checks. Some of our affiliates do background checks, not as a barrier, but just to see where they're at. So I'll know what hurdles I need to help you overcome in order to get into housing. We prioritize dignity and access without compromising safety or accountability. Housing First for Family Promise means meeting people where they're at while ensuring families and staff are protected and respected.
And Shari, if I can just chime in here, I think with a lot of our affiliates too, and hopefully other providers as well, paperwork might be gathered or questions will be asked, and it's not meant to be a barrier to folks accessing services, but to figure out what they need. So, our affiliates do ask for identification. We don't want that to be a barrier for them to come into shelter that day if they need a safe place to be. But it helps us, one, sometimes hold on to their paperwork on their behalf should they need that, but then also to help know, oh, they don't have a state ID. This is critical. That is going to be needed for any employment opportunity, housing opportunity. So now we know how we can help them with case management. So we sometimes will ask, or some affiliates will still maybe do drug testing, but it's to sort of get a baseline or to see where the families are at, what services and supports they might need, but it's not meant to be a barrier to accessing services.
I'll just add in
Yeah.
also that depending on where housing is sourced, if it's through federal government housing, there's an intake process that does ask a lot of questions. A lot of times that might not be the very first thing, so you can build that trust. It also, I know Sam could elaborate, but sometimes going through that process, you find out a lot, and a lot that perhaps somebody, like at a church or congregation, somebody there might have gotten some information and didn't get the whole information. And it can really impact how they can receive help. So.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, my old affiliate in Wilmington, Delaware, like Shari, I came from one of our sites to the national office. So we would do a background check and a credit report for any of our programs. And that was so it was a tool for the family. Sometimes it was the first time they had ever seen their credit report, or they thought there was charges on their record. They weren't, or they thought they never had a charge and there were, charges. So it just helped to give the information if there was evictions or whatever we were dealing with. So then we would know what programs could they qualify for and where could we help them. Because housing first, again, it just means first. So it's the first thing we want to focus on is that stable housing. We'll still tend to all the other stuff, but that will come after. And Margaret mentioned trust, and I feel like that goes right into your slide, Shari.
So our impact with stabilization services, so families trust in us, which means they're going to reach out when they have problems, which a lot of people are like, oh no, they're failing, so they're coming back to us. That's not failure. That's actually showing that we were building a successful relationship with these families or with the people that we serve. So when you see people coming back, is that they trust us and they trust our guidance and they know that we really will be able to help them. So it's not a failure, it's actually a success. Program extensions, a lot of times we're hesitant to like keep somebody in shelter maybe longer than they should be, or maybe in rapid rehousing, because I only want to do rapid rehousing. A lot of the programs are like, oh, you get 6 months of rapid rehousing, or you get, so it's a short term or whatever, but it needs to be flexible in order to work. You need to do it by case basis because you are doing those stabilization services while they're in the home. So it might take longer than 6 months. So you have to be willing to extend your program sometimes and be flexible with the need and consider it not to be a failure just because they slip up, or just because, if I go back to the hammer analogy, just because we gave them a wrench now doesn't mean they actually know how to use the wrench. So sometimes they'll slip up and go back to using the hammer because that's what they were comfortable with. That's what they've known. So we have to be able to give them time to learn how to use the wrench before we remove our services from them. It's actually preferred by landlords. When you're looking at the rapid rehousing type setting, they like the fact that our case managers go in once a week because there's somebody that has eyes on their home, on their property. So if something goes awry, like the case manager will be there to take care of it because before it turns into a major problem later down the road. And children, of course, because we are a child agency, they gain educational consistency and security.
I just want to hammer home, no pun intended, the program extension piece. So we do have some affiliates who really grapple with, well, if we're doing housing first and we're lowering our barriers to services, our outcomes are going to be worse. And so I always want folks to pause before we start thinking of, better or worse outcomes, but also reframing what success means. So if someone was experiencing literal homelessness, sleeping in their car, or in any place not meant for human habitation, and now they have a safe place to be tonight, and they're building a relationship and they're working on their goals, that's a win, that's a success. So it's less of this, what's the length of stay? When did they move out? A little bit of funding was used. Happily ever after, we really need to get a bit more innovative of how we see success, and also for families to define the success for themselves too.
So, of course, like I was saying before, just giving the tools isn't enough. Housing first is not housing only. Stabilization services are how we teach our families and our individuals who we serve how to use the new tools that we're giving them. So that includes conflict resolution, like Sam was talking about his family, parenting, budgeting, all those things come into play once they are in housing and we're doing those stabilization services. It allows them to recover from trauma because even though we would like to think our shelters are happy and loving, they're still going through a traumatic event because they are still homeless. So in order to recover from that trauma, you have to be in housing. So once they are housed, they can recover from the trauma that they experienced. And now they can start building relationships, better relationships with our guidance with landlords, because a lot of times there's that, oh no, if I do something wrong, I'm going to get evicted, or the sink was a little bit runny, but I didn't want to call them because I don't want to bother anybody. So helping them navigating those situations, letting them know, hey, the landlord isn't always out to evict you, because that is a trauma response. If they were evicted before, they're scared they're going to be evicted again. So working with them to build those landlords relationships and building the trust between the tenant and the landlord.
I think that trauma response is really critical, whether it's individuals or families, but sometimes housing first might not necessarily even be where our clients are coming from. So I remember we were working with a dad in shelter, and we walk through, what's your goals? Where are you at? What's the plan here? And he was so fixated on some health goals he had, and he wanted to get back his gym membership, and he wanted to lose a certain amount of weight. And again, I was like, that's awesome, right? But you and your family are sleeping in our shelter program right now. So is this the number one goal? Should this be the priority? But he had a lot of fear about going back into housing because it didn't work out right before Family Promise. That's why he was coming to us. So working through some of that, and if there's goals related to the housing, we definitely tended to that. But also letting him know, like, don't give up on that health and wellness goal, but that might be better in a couple of months when you're in your own place and you can get to the gym whenever you want. But sometimes who we're working with don't necessarily come to housing first right away too. So it's not even just convincing other folks in the community, it's helping us work through it with those we're serving.
So why housing first works? What studies say. So we do, of course, we work with children. So a lot of our stats are with children, but children exposed to early trauma and instability are experiences known as adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, are significantly more likely to experience homelessness later in life. So dealing with childhood homelessness is a preventative measure to ensure that they don't become homeless as adults. Homelessness in adulthood is strongly tied to trauma in childhood. So by doing housing first, especially for children, we're eliminating that extent of trauma that they're experiencing in their homeless situation, so that they can, again, recover from that trauma and hopefully break that cycle before they reach adulthood. Family separation through child welfare systems, a lot of times you're thinking, oh, it's because the parents did something wrong with. No, it's more than 30% of family separations occur due to economic hardships, not abuse. So if they have housing first, they can get their kids back. And again, removing a child is very, very traumatic for that child. Even they want to be with their parent, they want to be with their family. And even that little short stint of them being removed in order for their families to find housing is very, very damaging to not only their growth, their I guess their mindsets, their brain development. I'm sorry, my brain was not working, but their brain development going forward is also impacted when they're in constant states of trauma or crisis. So getting them back into the housing with their family helps eliminate that crisis mindset and helps their mind to adjust and start to growing the way it should. And housing first, like I said, disrupts the cycle and fosters better community. So it provides immediate housing before trauma worsens. It keeps the family together and avoids unnecessary child removal from the house. And it creates safe spaces for stabilization and healing. And that is the most important part of housing first, is giving that safe space for stabilization and healing to take place for the family. So bottom line is, early stable housing is not only a health intervention, it's a family preservation strategy. Like, if we can do it for the kids, we're breaking that cycle. And then when they become adults, hopefully they won't get back in the system and the cycle won't repeat. So help families fill their toolbox. So housing provides the foundation, stabilization provides the instruction, relationships provide the fasteners to your home, and building home, hope, and thriving communities is the goal of Family Promise, and it should be the goal of anybody that's serving families or serving anybody that's experiencing homelessness. The goal should always be building home, hope, and thriving communities.
And Margaret also has our contact information, but I did just want to highlight that the link to on the YouTube channel that Margaret referenced at the beginning.
So y'all did watch it? Did you watch it, Carolyn?
Yeah, parts of it. I wasn't able to watch the whole thing, and life happens sometimes when you try to.
Of course. So, good. So anybody have some comments to add? And I can call on Sam first to see if Sam's got anything to add from our experience with people we serve.
Well, just to touch on a few of the things that you all talked about, not just families, but individuals both suffer the same things. I've got a gentleman that's been housed for 3 years now, and he's scared to death to tell his landlord if anything tears up. He's sure his landlord's going to put him out of the place. When you're out here on the street, there's just really no way you're in survival mode. You're just trying to make it through each and every day. You're not looking at the future. So it's so important to get them into housing so that they can focus on the other stuff they need to change in their life. One of the big things we've seen locally is community for them. Once we get them housed, all their friends are still homeless. And them wanting to bring their friends over and stuff causes trouble with landlords. I've seen several of them become unhoused about that. So I was just wondering if you all had any experience with that, if you all had suggestions on that. Of course, dealing with families, it may not be as hard because they have the school system and all that. But where we deal with individuals a lot, it's hard to transfer them from one community to another. So.
I think it still goes for our families because when we look at it, a lot of our families are coming from generational poverty. So when we're taking them out of their family system where their whole family, their whole friend structure came from poverty and we're placing them in a new community, it's still hard to create, like you said, that separation. So they still bring, want to bring my cousin, I'm going to bring my friends over. And because they're friends and like you said, and stuff, they're still in that survival mindset. They don't see what our families or our individuals that we're working with are trying to accomplish. They think that they might be, you're acting better than us. Oh, you're not one of us anymore. And it does cause a little bit more trauma that they are going to have to deal with. And when I talk to service providers, it's kind of for a time period, you are kind of their community because they've had to do that shift and they can't go back to their friends. They can't go back to their family. You have now become their community community system. And that's why, like we were talking about before, I think somebody brought up the churches. This is where they need to step in. We need to build a community around these individuals, families who are going through this transition so that they can continue to make those strides because it's very tempting, especially when your whole support used to be support network is now turned against you. It is very tempting for you to return to that place because it hurts. It's not comfortable anymore. And you have to try to redefine yourself on your own. And it is very difficult. And that's why, like I said, it needs the support of the service providers and hopefully help them find and build a new community.
So to add to that, I think I would imagine everybody on here is familiar with Ruby Payne's work, the framework for understanding poverty, but that's a whole lot of what she addresses is that difficulty for the whole culture of poverty versus culture of middle class versus culture of now we talk a lot about the 1%. And what the skill sets are in each of those and how, and so just appreciating that, but also figuring out how to support people and as they try to develop new communities.
We've seen
or
some examples
become.
too where they do like support groups amongst themselves, right? So similar to, a recovery model or AA groups, but so, Family Promise has a family advisory council. So the primary lens of that is this is an opportunity for folks who are in our programming to give input on the programs, what worked, what didn't, have some, oversight into that. We want their voices at the table too, along with other stakeholders. Sometimes though, that can kind of form into a support group amongst themselves. And then other communities have created groups. And so again, sort of bringing folks together who have been through a similar journey. And there's a lot of fears and anxieties about it. I just remember like when families would move out from shelter, certainly it was really celebratory and everyone's like, this is great, you got the keys. There can also be trepidation though, and a lot of mixed emotions, from the family to move out to a unit.
And I guess with that also is the recognition of what our case managers do and how hard it is. And I know Sam has talked, this job does allow him to do more of the continued wraparound services, but there's only so much time, only so much energy to commit to that. And it certainly takes a lot of both of those. So.
For sure. And, we were talking in a recent meeting too about rapid rehousing. And so again, it's another term that sometimes gets a bad rap or people have different opinions or it doesn't always work. The question is, have we really implemented it to fidelity? Because the original rapid rehousing model was sort of this three-pronged approach where you had that housing location support, right? Landlord, Rolodex person. And you had financial assistance that would step down over time gradually. But then that third prong was the supportive services. And so what has unfortunately happened in some communities is not all those three components are funded and supported. And then you wind up sometimes with one person having to wear all those hats, and they're very different. So the hat you're wearing when you're trying to hustle and get landlords and convince them this is a good idea, that is a much different skill set and commitment than the hat of working with, the client on goals and dreams and aspirations, and you have to pay your rent on time and working through all of that. So it winds up putting a lot of pressure on our system, and then we kind of inadvertently have to cut corners, not that we want to, but if you have to make decisions and choices when there's so many folks who could use our help, it's hard. It's hard and complicated is the end of our presentation, which is not the most optimistic to leave. But Sam, I really appreciated your story at the beginning. I think just again, the reminder, like we talk about these terms and these philosophies, but what it really comes down to though is what does it mean for the person in front of us and what does it mean for who we're serving? And, helping them on their journey to lasting independence, which is the goal of Family Promise, and I think the goal of all of us on this call.
Others want to add anything? So I have a question and I don't know, it probably depends on how the data is even defined, but I know that there is some data on, and probably the oldest is domestic violence, for how many times a person has to leave that domestic violence situation before it is the one that succeeds. And it used to be, when I first learned about it, a lot of the shelters were limiting to 3 visits, and the data showed 5 times. And somebody recently said it's even 9 times now, which is pretty interesting to understand why it's so much higher now. And I think on recovery, there's some data too so do we have data on how many, for particularly when we're looking at generational poverty and they're having to change, I mean, that's social change for their own lives. Do we have any data to know? And I mean, there's different stories and families are different than individuals, but whether there's any data that might give us an idea.
I don't want to speak for the group, but I will. But I don't think we actually have that data right at our fingertips, but that would be really helpful data. So I think Kara and I can explore that. And I think that's why we really try to take this long view approach, not only just like 1 or 2 years with a family, but that generational piece, because sometimes we again see success as family was in shelter, they got out in 30 days to housing, but what's happening over the next year or 2 years, right? Cars break down, jobs change, rents skyrocket. So, the path to long-term success isn't necessarily linear, but if we're always just capturing it in those moments, then it's going to look like a failure and someone goes back into rehab for the 10th time. But it might be that 11th time where things stick and you couldn't get to that 11th time until you went through all the other 10 times.
And John Knack just put his
Yep.
information. If anybody else, that's what we usually do. And I forgot to ask people to do that, to put your information in the chat if you want to go ahead and do that. Yeah, we also earlier on, we had a really, with the original model, we had a family that just thrived and did great. They were showcased a lot. And then we lost them at some point, lost track. And I think it was that the expectations were put up here. And then they didn't feel comfortable coming back when they struggled. So I think it's a balance. We want people to hear stories. We want to highlight successes, but there's a lot of damage we can do if we're not careful on how we do that. And when we do it, how we do it, etc. So anyway, anybody else want to, Sam, do you want to add anything else? Anybody else want to add anything else?
I just had real quick, talking about long term, and I've heard so many times we housed that person and they blew it, and we're not going to do it again. And to me, I mean, I take it personal when somebody I house when they don't make it. I'm like, I'm the one that blew it for not following through with the case management properly. I mean, sometimes you can't control it. I will grant that, but it's so important to keep up with these people long term. Like I said, I have a gentleman that's been stable for 3 years now, and he just recently, part of his Medicaid was cut, and his medicine's only $5 a month. And to me, that's like $5. You're really, but then when you think about the fact that he has $900 to live on for the month, his rent's $500. He's got other bills to go along with that. That $5 is detrimental to him. So I mean, we really have to stay with these people long term. When they do mess up, we have to realize it wasn't on purpose. I mean, they definitely didn't go back to homelessness on purpose. And a lot of times it's partially my job to help stabilize people. But when someone draws $781 a month, $900 a month with the current rental market and everything, unless you find money falling out of the sky or they win the lottery or something, you're going to be supporting them over a very long period of time to try to help them become stable. So.
Thanks, Sam.
Anybody else want to add anything, or is there anything y'all want to share that's not necessarily related, but while we're together? And anybody else from Family Promise National want to add anything?
I mean,
I'm sorry. You can go, Karen.
Actually, more important for you to talk, so please.
No, I just want to just thank you guys for all the work that you are doing in your community and being that voice, because I know it can be difficult to advocate for the clients that we have to advocate for in an environment where, like I said, I'm from Florida, so we get a lot of pushback politically on a lot of our stuff. So I greatly understand how hard it can be sometimes, how challenging it is, and I hope that you guys are doing what you guys need to do to reduce that toxic stress that you might be feeling, because you're carrying so much weight for our families and for the individuals that we serve. And just make sure you are taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others.
Thank you.
Everything that Shari just said. And that, so I mean, I'm new to this role in advocacy, right? I've been doing child and family advocacy for a while in a different role, but new to Family Promise. And so, we're trying to be thoughtful, but of course, providing information, right, that's helpful and ways to take action when it makes sense. And but also about, what we're hearing, when it comes to housing first and what might be coming down the line, and learning from other partners about maybe strategic language that's helpful, right? So you can continue doing the work. But I know sometimes the term housing first, right, just itself can be hard, and weighted, like Carolyn mentioned, right? So, like, what are ways that we could support you to continue doing the work that works, right? And so, like, I just want you to know that's where I think our headspace is. And so please reach out, as we're trying to, build a larger policy platform, and just think about ways we could support the work and engage with HUD and folks here, as to what we're hearing, and ways we could be helpful, and make sure that folks know all the great work Family Promise is doing, and hopefully have that influence policy as well.
Brad, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, again, this was definitely a great conversation. Of course, with my role as the director of housing, as Carolyn mentioned, we would like to connect again with those congregations who have the land or available buildings that we can potentially partner to see if we can build some affordable housing. I did leave my information there in the chat. Again, please reach out if you have any leads in that area.
Thank you. And we know about some of those models, and even single apartments that some of, I think Johnson City has a couple of houses or apartments that they use as transitional, but that may become permanent,
Okay,
which is one of the models that you
Okay.
can do, is make it transitional, but you can then have a family stay and then assume the rent, and then the organization can find another place
Right,
to
right.
use this. So I like those models for how to proceed.
Mhm.
Well, thank you. And Kara, thank you very much. It is important to acknowledge where we are right now, and it's pretty scary times for all of us service providers, both thinking of our own positions, what may happen, but the bigger picture is a great amount of uncertainty, and the vision that many of us have is pretty grim going forward for what we think the impacts of some of the policies coming down are going to be. And it's going to, as we said yesterday in a meeting, I think it's going to break a lot of our hearts. We've got to figure out how to stay as strong as we can, and take care of ourselves in the process. So tough stuff. So Kara, thank you for doing the advocacy work. It's something that we tend to not do as much because it's really hard. So acknowledge that we appreciate your taking that on and working with that. So I will say that our next meeting is scheduled for June 27th, and Willard Robertson, who is with Highlands Community Services, is going to talk about gambling. And that's, as those on the call know, in Virginia just started casinos a few years ago, and we have one here in Bristol, Virginia, and he works the area. Actually, I think he does some work at the state level too. So we'll look forward to hearing more from him at that meeting. We also cooperate with Bristol Coalitions. They meet on those meetings are on the fourth Friday, such as this one. And then the June 10th is Bristol Coalitions. They meet on the second Tuesday at noon, and they do a hybrid meeting. You can go in person, have some lunch, or you can come in via Zoom. I try to share that information with this list as well, if you're not already on that list. So we try to coordinate to some extent the programs that we're doing so they complement each other. With that, if y'all don't have anything else, we want to say thank you very much again. And I will try to get the YouTube up by next Tuesday. And then it's available on our YouTube channel, and I can send that out, and remind, Family Promise people that's where it is. So that helps to make it available for y'all to make the benefit of spending time with us even bigger. So really appreciate that very, very much. So with that, this is Memorial Day weekend. Everybody be safe. Here it's cooler, which is my cup of tea, to have a little cooler weather. So we'll hope that that everybody has a good weekend. So, all right, take care.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.